Hi, Benji.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. Benoit, how you doing?
Hi.
We are speaking together at the Polish meetup. I really love Benji.
Yeah, I saw that. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to your talk.
Me too.
I mean, we already talked about. I mean, we are doing like execution plans for I think 3 years now.
Indeed.
And it really is. Especially if you work with databases, then you can get huge benefits from it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, all.
Oh, hi.
How's everyone doing?
Great. I saw you proposed the one-off topic, right?
Oh, yeah, just a quick question about it. Yes. Yep, totally.
And it's good that somebody puts it on the agenda again.
Yeah, that's why exactly.
I mean,
I would just sneak it on there.
I know Benji is reluctant because he's now in the struct world, but I still find it
That's what I
valuable
want to know. Because
one-off is we have implemented it and it's basically almost finished.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great.
So
will be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Just saw it and I thought, yeah. It's good that you put it back on the agenda.
It'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on it, Benji, since I think they're both your proposals, right? Does one supersede the other? But I guess we'll get there.
Yeah, let's discuss that during the meeting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. Can't believe it's December already. Wow.
December indeed.
Seriously.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. Snuck up on us.
So did you get your snowboard already out?
It is out all year long. It is. Yes.
Year long?
Yeah. It sits out, but I do not use it all year long.
Oh,
No.
okay. I was like, how are you finding an opportunity to snowboard year round? What do you know that I don't?
I do live near mountains, but they do not have enough snow on them all year long. Michael, you're probably pretty close to mountains with snow on them all year long.
Yeah, so it's 20 minutes in the Alps.
Yeah.
And so I'm just waiting a couple more days to have a bit more. And then yeah, but my snowboard is ready.
Nice.
Freshly waxed. So
yeah, nice. Great.
Amazing. I gotta go visit you.
Yeah.
Yeah, come over.
You can host the working group call in person at your place. Sounds good.
Followed by skiing and snowboarding.
Yeah, that's
that would be a good time.
Yes.
Do we have close to quorum here? Let's see how many folks we got. 13. Pulling up our agenda file. I imagine we might have a couple late stragglers, which is okay.
There was a little bit of confusion, Lee. Quite a few people thought it was on the 12th. I think possibly because of the 12-deck numbering of the folder,
Oh, wow.
which I think is
Oh.
fine. And I think it will fix itself next year by virtue of being only a folder system with 1 Jan, 2 Feb, etc. But this year does seem to maybe have confused a couple of people.
Good to know. I was not aware of that confusion. I'm actually in the middle of putting together a PR to add 2023 agenda file templates, and have adopted, I think, Michael, maybe it was your suggestion to add the day into the file name, but I'm doing that for 2023 and onwards. So hopefully that makes it less confusing. But yes, December is in fact the 12th month of the year. That's the 12th. But I can certainly see how that could get confusing. But we got 14 out of 16 of folks who are listed as attendees. I think that's pretty good. So we'll get started. Welcome everybody to the last working group, or primary working group, I should say, of the year, because we've got the EU and the APAC ones set up later, which will be exciting too. Of course, as always, by joining, we're agreeing to the spec membership agreement, participation guidelines, contribution guide, and code of conduct. Links in the agenda file if you ever want to refresh yourself what's in there, what you're agreeing to by joining. As per usual, let's do a quick round of intros, names to faces. That way, anyone who happens to be new can hear from everyone. Also a great AV check. I took the liberty of sorting the agenda file by first name alphabetical order, with the exception of myself, since I knew I'd be talking first. So hello, everybody. My name is Lee. We'll go down the list. Benji, you're up.
Hey everyone, Benji here.
Hey, I'm Benoit from Apollo.
Bobby from Stepson.
It's Derek from Apollo.
Hi there, it's Dennis from the Guild.
Hi all, Hugh from Apollo.
Hey, I'm Gerald from Apollo.
Matt here, otherwise.
I don't see Mark.
Okay, then
yeah,
I'm
I don't
Michael.
see Mark.
Oh, sorry.
but I'm Matt from Meta.
And I'm Michael from Jelly Green.
Rob from First Dibs.
Hi, I'm Roman from Microsoft.
I'm Steven, Netflix.
Hi, I'm Yakov, individual contributor.
Did we miss anybody?
Yes, I
didn't add myself.
PR was minutes.
Sorry, say it. We had two people talking at the same time.
Yeah,
I heard from you,
Ivan from
Ivan.
Apollo, and yeah, so I submit PR last minute.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't get a PR open. I'm Greg from Wayfair.
Welcome. Welcome, folks who are joining for the first time, or for the first time in a while. And yeah, please feel free to send a quick PR that we can get your names on there. I'll get them merged as we dig into the content. I know I see Benji already in the notes doc, as per usual. I see a couple people. They're all anonymous, so I assume they're Benji. Can we just get a quick confirm of who's helping us take notes, especially in the cases where Benji is chiming in for discussion? It'd be helpful to have a designated backup note taker.
I can try to help. Oh.
I heard multiple, I don't know exactly who's saying what where, but thank you for the enthusiastic multiple voices in to help out with notes. Hugely valuable thing that we have high quality notes as the result of these. Thank you. Let's take a quick look over the agenda for the day. If there's anything missing, we can add it in. As per usual, we'll take a quick look over any action items that may happen to be open from previous meetings, see if there's any updates on those. I would like to talk a little bit about the technical steering committee elections that are now underway. Oh, I had thought I had added an agenda. Maybe I missed something. Another thing that I wanted to talk about that's not listed here is the scheduling of these meetings heading into next year. Mostly just want to get a gut check that we can keep doing what we've been doing, but I think it's worth a discussion. Defer and stream discussion with Rob, and next steps for the Oneoff from Hugh. I might flip those orders just so that if that's a short discussion, we can have that first. Any other things that we want to talk about or changes to the agenda we want to have? I'm editing now to apply the changes I just suggested. I will take silence as a confirmation that we are talking about the right stuff.
Yep.
All right. I have updated the agenda. If everyone would mind taking a quick refresh. Okay, let's do a quick look at open action items. I'm just gonna myself pop open these first few links. I see nothing that is explicitly marked as ready for review. That's okay. We can just look at the things that are actively open. And they are sorted by last change, which many of these are from roughly a month ago. So I have a feeling that there's probably not a lot for us to close. Yeah, I think these are the notes that we took from last time. So maybe it's worth taking a minute or two just for us to go through a couple of these. Let me see if I can share my screen just so that we're all looking at the same things for a sec. Cool. Can everyone see my browser?
Yep.
All right. Issues. So I'll just go through these one at a time. We had a note from the last meeting about, okay, relaxing field selection merging rules, speaking to those still open, worth investigating. I'm going to leave this one open still. I think maybe something to think about here is if anyone is interested in actually picking this up. I think this is an open action. Yvonne, I know it's been sitting on your plate, but please feel free to delegate this to someone. This is one of those important to investigate, but certainly not urgent. So if anyone feels excited about looking into relaxing this field selection merging rules or just wants to learn more about it, then drop Yvonne a note and I'm sure he'll tell you all about it.
Is it about spec or is it about particular implementation in GS?
That one is about implementation.
It feels like a bit out of place.
It's
it's actually about spec. Yeah, we can talk offline to make it.
Okay.
You can ping and I will consult you. It's about spec.
It's just,
I can point to
.NET
videos
and
when we discuss it.
I'm wondering, doesn't concern me or not? That's all right.
It shouldn't continue yet. This is an exploration task. To add a little bit of clarity here, the discussion that led us here was relaxing a constraint on field selection merging. And the spec text is relatively straightforward, but the ramifications of that were less straightforward. And we realized the right next action was to write some code that actually implemented this and have that as a testing ground to better understand the implications. That was the piece of that. Yeah, of course. One of these other open ones is on you. I'm totally okay for this one to remain open.
Yeah, let's leave it because I was busy, sorry, and still rethinking the strategy around this.
Yep, not a problem. We'll leave it open. This one, maybe we can wrap this into the discussion that Hugh wanted to tap, but I think this is, we've got continue to have some irons in the fire to talk about input unions in particular, and then the broader problem domain that structs are against. Benji, I assume since you've got nothing written here, that you have nothing to report.
Nothing to report yet, but we can discuss that in a bit.
Very cool. Did this end up happening? There was this conversation about meta fields with the idea to open a public discussion about this. I guess some of the discussion is happening live here. Okay, I'm gonna leave this one open. There are two everyone tasks, which are both from mid-year. And I'm gonna bias in the direction of closing these. Rob, one of these was yours to have eyes on, which was about making sure that the discussion that you had opened yielded a useful outcome and got you the appropriate feedback. I know we're going to talk more about the current status of defer and stream. Do you feel like this particular angle has gotten the right discussion?
Yeah, it has. And my related discussion topic we came to consensus on, and it's marked as resolved, so we can close this.
Awesome. And this was a similar one. Hugh and Benji, you guys had flagged this one as wanting to make progress on GraphQL over HTTP.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and close that. We obviously Dennis has been doing the work on the test suite for GraphQL over HTTP. There's also been a lot of input from Apollo and various other places. So this is definitely underway, and I think it's got enough eyes on it. So yeah.
Cool. Happy to get to close some of these. No, Alex isn't on the call today. I think client controlled nullability is still floating opened. I'm going to close this one since it is fairly aging. And I think this particular thread of feedback we mostly got. And there's probably a separate set of stuff that we need to do to make client controlled nullability ship ready. So this task is not meant to track client controlled nullability shipping. It's just gathering that feedback, which I believe we did. That one is on me. That one's open. I know about. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. That gets us a year back. We don't need to go through all these. Cool. Thank y'all for the discussion. I'll stop sharing here. We will move forward. Good to close some open actions from before. Next up is I wanted to make sure everybody here was aware of the technical steering committee elections that are coming up. I have some links that are in the agenda to that. I posted this a couple of weeks ago. I realized that the nomination opening date had kind of slipped past me. What was supposed to happen, what we have written in the charter, is that we sort of open nominations and announce that at the beginning of November. And so the last of these primary meetings, when we probably should have been talking about this, that's okay. I've shifted the whole kind of schedule for these back by 1 month. So please check out that first link, which is the issue thread that I have open that's essentially tracking the entire elections process. Got a ton of information there. The most important thing that most folks here need to keep in mind is that nominations are open and they will be open through the end of this month. There's a link to the form both in the agenda and in that issue. So if you are interested in becoming a member of the TSC, then please apply there. I'll preempt one question that may be in the back of your minds for some folks, which is, what does it mean to be on the TSC? What's the difference between that and just joining these calls? The answer is not a ton. There are a handful of things that are explicitly requiring votes where you need a sort of fixed denominator to run those votes. And the TSC runs those voting process. These elections is one of them, but there are a couple others. Actually, one of the more exciting ones is how we decide on issuing technical grants. So the foundation board gives us a source of funding and we dole those out via grants, and the TSC is actually the ones who make those decisions. The other thing that the TSC is responsible for is administration of GitHub. So many folks here have write permissions for various repos, but TSC members have write permissions across the entire set of repositories. The goal there being to scale myself and Elisa to make sure that we make sure everything remains well maintained. We ran this last year. I think it was pretty smooth. We got a handful of new folks in the TSC as a result. I did note that or in this comment thread, both Nick, Dan, and Rob mentioned upfront that they were not planning to renominate themselves. I'll check with Andy. I believe Andy probably will want to renominate himself, and I'll check with Sasha. And so it seems like at a minimum, we'll probably have, I mean, all the seats are open, so there'll be a vote for all of them, but there's a healthy appetite for folks to nominate themselves. Anyway, that's my high level pitch. I wanted to talk about this explicitly so that if anyone had questions, I could speak to those questions. No questions? All right, cool. Well, I hope to see a handful of you nominate yourself to be part of the TSC. And we will run the voting process starting at the beginning of next year. And that'll probably happen fast. I have us earmarked to have a month open to run the vote. I think last year we actually managed to complete the voting process in less than a week. So it's likely the case that sometime in early January, we will know what that looks like and can roll out the change. Cool. That was that one. Next one is also on me. This is likely a very quick conversation, which is just, I want to gut check meeting cadence for these working group meetings heading into next year. As I was mentioning before, I've got a pull request that I have in flight that is adding the agenda file templates for 2023. And if there's any changes that we want to talk about, whether it's dates, times, frequencies, structure of the templates, any feedback anybody has, I'd love to hear it before I get that up and going.
I'm wondering, is there a better way to sign up for the meeting? I understand we're all coders and GitHub, you know, PR and all that stuff. It's kind of our everyday thing, but just for this, you know, clone the report, you know, create a PR, push somebody else. Although it is kind of open meeting, you know, it still seems like weird process for this activity. I have nothing to suggest instead, but maybe somebody has.
I was gonna ask that too.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. At least there's the GitHub UI, you can hit the like edit icon and it's like editing a text file live in the browser, which is slightly less bad than having to locally clone and push a PR and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. What do people feel about this? Is the benefit of having this as flat files in a repo worth the kind of editing?
What
burden,
about
or should we
Google
explore
Doc,
this?
Excel spreadsheet, Google Doc?
Yeah, but
Maybe
it's more hidden with the PI, with the GitHub repository. I find it more like we're keeping a better history of the things. It just my feeling.
Yeah,
The
and
history.
it's nice the way it is. I agree. There's some friction for sure, but a lot of times folks that are signing up to be added to the agenda are actually making proposals for the agenda as well. And it's nice to have that kind of commit history, that revision history in one place.
Okay.
Maybe somebody
And-
could come up with a bot where we could, you know, automate some of that for members who've already joined.
But there's also like in the GitHub integrated the bot that checks if you're if you signed the agreement.
Yeah,
CLA. That's a good point.
That's actually pretty important because it is in fact a requirement of attending these meetings that you have done that, which we are we're not super aggressive at policing, but that is there's an important reason to that, which is this is an open conversation, and therefore anything anyone says about anything could be contributed or construed as a contribution. And the last thing we want is for someone to go grumpy rogue in the legal sense and litigiously cause this group to grind to a halt. And so that's the primary reason for that. Yeah, putting that in the PR path is useful. Just potentially other paths. It's kind of interesting. I like this idea of a like an automated way. Like there's certainly a manual-ish cleanup that has to happen where you know, if people put these up, they wait for them to get merged and multiple people put them up at the same time, and you got to deal with merge requests. And like on the back end of getting these merged is actually kind of equally an annoying process. And maybe there's some set of things we can investigate in terms of auto PR merge. Like if you've signed the COC, like there's zero reasons why we've ever rejected a pull request to one of these files. The only one is please wait until the code of conduct is signed. And I'm wondering.
But it feels like even email to one person, you know, you wanna participate, send email with just one line. Roman from Seattle, and then once in a couple of days, this person just actually edits this file and adds the. I don't know. So I'm ready to close this. It was just an idea.
Yeah.
A lot of people do the actual merging of the agenda items. I think that's better rather than putting it all on one person's head.
Yeah, that's true.
We could also we could also automate issues. So you open an issue and you basically describe what your agenda would be, and the bot would push that to a PR, a single PR, of course, which is a collection of everybody that had opened an issue. That would be one way. But of course, that would spam the issues tab, and there would be a lot of issues for each individual wanting to join.
Yeah. It's interesting. If anyone feels particularly nerd sniped by this and wants to write a bot or do something else to make administering the like adding to the agenda and managing the agendas, that would be quite useful to see. But okay, this is a useful thread to pull on. So thank you for the prompt, Roman. And I heard kind of mostly radio silence about cadence, which maybe is not super surprising since it was only a couple of months ago that we talked about extending this to the 3 a month. But my thought there was just a gut check, like those are still good. I know a handful of folks are attending multiple of those a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I do like that it seems that, this is usually the most popular meeting. It is nice that the other two have room for longer form discussion sometimes. So I think that's been a nice kind of result of splitting things up a bit.
Yeah. Oh, but that is reminding me that one thing I think I had mentioned a meeting or two ago that we would add a standing agenda is to sort of report back on major things that had been discussed in those other meetings. So that we don't just rely on everyone here going back and reading those. Certainly almost all of them are always interesting. It's useful to, at a minimum, take a look at the agenda, and if anything is interesting, follow through to the notes. But that's something I can add to the standard agenda template.
It would also be good if we can automate the uploading to YouTube as well, so that they go out a bit quicker.
I love that idea. I have no idea how to implement it. But
me neither.
If you
more bots,
bots on bots.
Yeah.
I know that Zoom has a feature that allows you to open a stream to YouTube rather than just purely recording a video.
Yes, that works. That works well.
You used it before?
Yeah, so it's also almost zero setup. If you essentially put a stream key from YouTube in there, and then it even automates creating that video on YouTube. So essentially, it's live streamed. You can follow it, and after that, it's persisted on YouTube.
I would suggest to hold off still. Who knows what might happen? Something embarrassing. We're all turning on a video of our homes and so on. So it's better to first record it, and then if everything is okay, upload it. Not live stream from homes.
That's a reasonable flag. Certainly, at a minimum, we'd want to make sure everyone is comfortable with that. And it's a good thing to default to, assuming no.
Worst comes to the worst, we can always take the video down from YouTube, I think.
But it's already kind of out if you stream it. So it's a sensitive topic. Because things happen.
But Discord is also open. I mean, it's as open as the YouTube thing. I'm not saying that we have to do that, but by joining here, you already are public. Everybody can join this.
Yeah,
I understand.
It's a good flag.
It's one thing to join the meeting, but it's another thing to be able to see it in perpetuity.
Yeah. Okay, we'll table that. I think the main idea here is not necessarily to make it go live. It's just to make the mechanics of uploading the videos after the fact easier. So we'll follow up on that later. Okay, thank you for the useful conversation, everyone. I've got good feedback on how to make sure the 2023 meeting cadence goes well. Okay, on to more interesting things to talk about. Hugh.
Yeah.
Talk about
yeah, sure thing. This should just be a super quick discussion, I'm thinking, but we've definitely heard from a lot of folks that are asking about Oneoff support and are seeing that the proposal made it to stage 2, but people are a little bit confused by the struct RFC and how it looks like it might be superseding Oneoff. And I was just wondering if we have any clarification. What are we thinking about Oneoff? Is this still something that has a chance to maybe get into the spec, or has it been truly superseded by the struct proposal?
So I'll take this. So yeah, sorry for letting this one sit for a little while. I've been incredibly busy doing other things, but I definitely want to get back to this. It's a big motivation for me at the moment. So struct and Oneoff are not strictly mutually exclusive. We can definitely have both, but it's not clear whether we need both. And I am quite keen on the struct idea. So I need to sit down. I've already, obviously written up that document that already exists, written out a whole number of the various use cases that it could be used to address, which isn't necessarily what it's intended to address, but it is things that it can address or things that it impacts. So people can look into that, read those, understand, see whether there's any, red flags there, or if in fact it's actually like a good solution for a few of those problems. I didn't really deliberately create this, or at least I didn't jump onto this because of the input unions problem. This was actually, I wanted structs, and we've wanted structs for a while. We've discussed them quite a lot. And for me, it was related to a few problems that I've seen with various client projects, such as tables of contents, documents like prose mirror style documents and things like that, that have like an arbitrary nested structure, but where you effectively want to be able to pull down the whole lot while still associating type information with them. But they can also address the input unions problem, and that could be done either via a one-off pattern, in which case it would be a one-off pattern that can be replicated on output and input, which would be nice. Or it could also be done potentially with the union style approach that I've laid out in the struct doc. Now, I wouldn't recommend that we have both of those, which is kind of the reason why struct is on ice. Why Oneoff is on ice. Thank you. Because I want to see which of those, if we are to go with struct, and that's a longer discussion, which of those unions would be better to do in there, whether it would be the one-off or whether it would be the more union sort of natural approach. And then based on that would then influence the one-off. So it's kind of, they are tied together, and that is the reason for the delay right now.
Got it. Okay.
I will flag that one of the reasons why because we had a counter proposal to Oneoff that was very similar to struct earlier on. And one of the reasons why we decided not to pursue it in favor of Oneoff was the realization that many existing schemas already had a structure that mirrored what Oneoff was doing, but just didn't have the tools to guarantee it, and therefore didn't have the ability to leverage the constraint. And there was the realization that in order to roll out input unions for those existing schemas, a new kind of thing like a struct would actually not really be viable. Like the migration path from what was already there to something like a struct would be pretty painful, and most people probably wouldn't go through it. But the application of Oneoff, since that's essentially already the modeling that they've been trying to display, would be much easier to adopt for existing schemas. I think that's something to keep in mind, is that assuming future uses of GraphQL that haven't happened yet, where they can start their schemas from scratch, it may be the case that struct is a more useful tool. But for all of the existing schemas that would like to incrementally adopt these new features, there's a steeper curve for adopting a new kind of thing than it is to adopt the directive, which is, earlier on, I also favored a struct kind of shaped approach. I got excited about that. And then this sort of line of thinking led me to I think, Benji, you were actually making the case that the directive was like much easier to adopt. So that doesn't necessarily, to your point, these aren't mutually exclusive, but maybe a reason to continue enthusiasm and momentum around Oneoff, instead of worrying that if the struct proposal were to go forward, then maybe Oneoff is less exciting. I think what we learned before is it's probably not quite right.
Also,
go on, Michael.
The impact of Oneoff is very small to the spec. So it doesn't really matter if we would say we take it into the spec and people already have an immediate value from it with new validation rules. But then a struct could come at a later point, because it will take a lot more time, I think, until this is really ready. And we found, you see that with defer and stream, how many edge cases you find while working on that then more in depth. So I would favor getting one-off in rather now and then later struct.
So one of the other reasons, I mean, one of the issues with one-off, right, is should it apply on output as well, or should it only apply on input? But more importantly, we've also been having discussions about metadata, about exposing things like directives with our output schema. And with that, it could be that we don't actually need one-off to be a specified thing. It could be its own thing, much like a custom scalar. Especially that will reduce the problem of having too many different forms of polymorphism in GraphQL, because I'm a little bit concerned if we have already interfaces and unions, and then we add one-off, and then if we maybe want to do something with struct that's maybe more of a union style thing as well, I'm a little bit worried that, you know, we're going to not want to do that. So giving people, if we can solve the metadata problem, people can start using one-off through introspection and everything like that without having to go too deep into the spec right now. And then we can fully specify it later if that is the right direction. But yeah, I think that struct and one-off work quite nicely together. So I am open to the idea of pushing one-off through, but I certainly wouldn't want to do it to the exclusion of struct.
Yeah, it sounds like there are use cases where both could be advantageous. You know, the stuff that you had touched on, Lee, where some people, it might be easier for them to use one-off versus struct in certain cases. So I think that's like pointing towards how we could support both.
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't be. I mean, I guess now somewhat controversial take that we have both inputs, or sorry, both interfaces and unions. Nick Schrock always pressured me on whether that was the right call or not early on, so you can give him some credit. Benji, my hunch is that having it in the primary spec will allow it to be most useful, because rather than having to cross-reference things, and there was enough subtlety to the behavior that it is worth having like a definitive definition for how it works. If someone comes across it, it doesn't feel foreign. There's like a single source of truth where we document these main things. And it may take some wind out of the sails of a motivation for a struct type, but honestly, if it did, then that's probably a reason not to pursue struct. I think like struct actually it does different and unique things beyond simply one-of. And if those other things aren't useful enough, then that's maybe a sign that it doesn't quite make the right balance of value added for complexity introduced. And so like that's probably actually like a very useful pressure test for us to apply.
Another thing that Benji mentioned, and that is one thing we have to think about, is if we want to really solve only the input case, or if we also want to apply the output case. That's also something we have to think about. At the moment, I think the last state was that we just applied for the input side because that's a problem area. And that's also where we have already the tagged union pattern in GraphQL, and it essentially just adds the validation around that. So it's anyway what people do.
Can I say something? So basically, I don't feel although it's a nice idea, I don't feel it needs to be in the spec. And here is why. So let's say I'm application developer. I have a choice, application, not framework, but particular GraphQL API. I'm building a model. So I can use union. The problem with union returning is that it returns something and client doesn't exactly know, it has to guess what is that if it needs to. Instead, I can create the type which contains a field with variation for every version of the one-off type essentially, and make all fields nullable. And then for each variation, I have specific tag, the field name. So it can be either this thing or this thing, but I have preceded it by the field name and it makes more clear, and it's essentially equivalent, right? The only thing I'm missing here with the validation rule is that I have to make all fields nullable, and essentially it means that I can return the thing with all fields null. It's inconvenience, and one-off can add to this the additional validation. Okay, it's only one field and skip all others. This is essentially kind of primitive thing, more or less no simple attribute that can be implemented as a custom attribute. And the question is, should we standardize this or not? I don't feel like it should be standardized. Required from every implementation to have it.
So the benefit, and that's why, were you talking about the output side where we already have the union, or were you talking about the input side? Because for the input side, you have like query validation. And that is something that takes this validation out of the runtime. So the typical how you do that with the tagged union pattern that many people do in their GraphQL schemas at the moment is that this validation happens on the runtime, but we can already do it much earlier and don't have to fail just on the field where it happens, right? We can already validate statically the query.
I understand. And what I'm saying is that it's pretty simple attribute, and custom implementation, hot chocolate or some other framework, server framework, can implement this. And what we are missing, should it be standardized or not? And required from everybody, because essentially, I don't think it's that essential that they will be required. Because again, if I'm on the input, I'm using the type which behaves as one-off. We can miss the fields on the input, and that's all right, right? It's still compliant if it's nullable. So essentially, it always will be in normal behavior, in normal functioning of the API. It's only one field with a specific type and so on, and it works nicely. The only thing we're missing is that the schema suggests that all of them can be null. And one-off adds to this additional, no, not all. One and only one always. And it's nice to have,
useful.
but it's nice to have. It's useful, but should it be standardized and required?
I feel very strongly
them?
that it should be standardized, because we've gotten, this is one of the most demanded changes to GraphQL that we've been hearing. It'd be one thing if just like amongst this crew, it'd be like, it would be a nice thing to have. The whole reason we've been working on this and trying to get it right is feedback from the greater GraphQL community that this is a critical missing piece. And we see it in schemas, people trying to emulate this and having a really hard time. That's why I feel pretty strongly that solving this root problem is quite important. And whatever form it takes, Oneoff, struct, whatever, we need to make sure that it's in the main specification. Otherwise, there's enough subtlety to applying these rules that it's very easy for things to get out of sync or for the behavior to be unclear, because there is no one place where you go to find the definition of how it works. That's the main value we produce.
I totally agree. It's valuable. It makes it. Then in this case, I would vote for one-off instead of input unions or anything. This is okay. We want to standardize something, then let's standardize one-off rather than other options. And structs make it. It's much more advanced case and should be left on this. This is absolutely clear, straightforward case. So I don't mind that it should be there, and probably most implementations should have it. I was questioning, should it be in kind of forced by the spec? And if you say so, yes, then my vote, for example, definitely for one-off.
I don't want to take any more time away from the next big conversation, but so it sounds like Oneoff is still something that is up for consideration, is what I'm hearing. So
yeah, and I think what we're hearing is sort of enthusiasm to make sure that we don't forget that. So
okay,
that's good.
Wow.
Thank you for the prod, Hugh. This is a useful
Okay,
one.
that's awesome. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Rob, hand it to you.
Hi. Yeah, so in the last meeting, we were talking about the issue that I linked, which I'll share on my screen. Yeah, it was opened by Yvonne, and it's that there's cases where it is ambiguous to clients if a defer was basically inlined or ignored or not. So here's one case with defer. It could also happen with stream. Let's say you have a stream with initial count 0, you get back an empty array. If there's other defers or streams in there, you don't know, are you getting more items in this array or is the array actually empty? So we were talking about it in the last meeting. A couple of ideas were kicked around. One of them was that perhaps there's like some kind of metadata we could send to give like the state of the server so the client will know what's pending. Is it working on this defer? Is it not intending to send it? Is it already in the response? I put a quick example of one potential solution. Not claiming this is like fully baked, but just as like a starting point for discussion. So I have an example here with both defer and a stream. And the idea would be there's a new top level field pending payloads. And that is kind of a snapshot of what the GraphQL execution is currently working on. So in this case, it's working on the 0th index of the item that's in films. It's also working on this defer. So we have both of these here. Just as a reminder, label when it's provided and path is a unique key that can identify any kind of defer or stream payload. You need both to do that. Yeah, so in this first example, we're working on that first item that's in the film stream and the defer. Now in the second payload, the second response, we're sending this payload for that first item in the array. So now this has been, we're working now on, still working on that defer, and we're also working on the second item that's in that array. Now in the third response, we're sending back the defer, so that's no longer included in pending payloads. We're working, and we are, yeah, this is a typo. That should be 1, but because we're still haven't sent the second item in that index, but when it is there, then it would be removed. So some caveats for this. Yeah,
this sounds really, so I read over it already, but it sounds very complicated, and also it doesn't solve the problem fully. I mean, the easiest way is really to put metadata into the query system, like essentially fragment modularity would solve that. And I think actually the label, the more I think about, the label is really not needed. And we are trying to architect around that. And I think overall, this makes it much more complex and error prone. Is my take from that.
My take is almost the opposite, where it's almost like what we really want is a UUID of each deferred, or each subtree that is deferred or streaming like that has not been fulfilled, and an ability to say this object either was already fulfilled, so just like it's in the existing payload, and maybe we say that by just not including it in pending at all, or like, yeah, you're going to have to wait for this only once we give you this UUID, like this pointer to the rest of the subtree at some later time. Is it actually fulfilled?
Matt, the thing why I think it's actually making it more error prone is if we think, so we are experimenting a lot with the implementations of defer at the moment. And if you work with relay, it can very easily happen that you actually degrade the server performance by just putting another stream on a list. And then you suddenly go from 20 patches to over 3,000 patches by accident. And if we as the server fix that error by just ignoring some of the streams that make the performance bad, you don't get these pending payloads or these labels anymore. And the way we found the best to track that is actually with metadata in the query. Essentially, the hack that you told me once is at the moment the best to work around that.
Yeah, this actually is, I guess my argument is given that hack seems to be proliferating in each implementation, it feel like that hack, what that hack really is it's placing some it's like placing in the actual response itself a location that can say, hey, yes, we did this, so don't even look at pending payloads, don't even look at the incremental key. And I think that having some way of, right, the server should basically be able to take that potentially 3,000 deferred items response and collapse it down into like 3 deferred items, right? That should be acceptable. But again, you need a way to know that has happened. So it does feel like the only way to do that is sticking in the response itself some value always that is unique to that actual defer, that yes, this is in fact available or not.
Yeah, that's why the labels actually, I find them not really helpful, because at the moment when we optimize on the backend side, the queries, the moment you lose that. And that's why I think the pending payload is more problematic.
I'd argue basically to have this fulfilled defer field exist, but the value that it produces is not true, but is instead the identifier for the pending payload, and possibly a tuple of the identifier and whether it's already fulfilled or something like that.
Does it make sense for something like this to be opt-in? Or maybe another way to frame this is this a generalized problem where the absence of this information across all defers is problematic? Or is this like a localized problem where there can be a case where for a particular defer, but most of the other one, like most of them you don't care about for a particular defer, you really care about knowing whether it's here or not here?
Yeah, so it's basically if we always put deferred payloads in incremental, then this is not necessarily a problem. If we know ahead of time that you always get the deferred payload, or that all of the deferred payloads are in fact in the initial response, again, not really a problem. It's when you have a mix where some of the deferred payloads are fulfilled, some are not, and it is generalized. Like, I don't know how you can have a client that like correctly handles this situation, basically. without having some inline metadata or some place that you can go to look.
It's either metadata or the fragment aliasing would also work. It's actually what I think is what I like at the moment the most, the fragment aliasing. You lose a bit on the field merging optimizations, but I think that is actually worth it. Yet, so just for I don't know if everybody gets the problem, because it's a lot of connected things here. The most that we worked. Maybe can I take the screen for a second? Let me just make one point. So because I'm actually experimenting on this a bit. Not this one. And that. So when we have like a query structure like this, and you can have that in Relay or whatever, Apollo, doesn't matter actually, but think about the fragment structures here. And you essentially stream this and defer this thing. And we would execute that, then we could see that we get around 16, maybe more patches that resolve here. But yeah, this is okay. So this is where the performance stays okay. And by just putting another stream here, this will now explode to 3,000 patches, right? And that is where now you're dead performance-wise. And also you put a lot on your backend. So what we do in the backend, and that's why I always argue so hard so that the server actually is allowed to optimize this, is we could actually identify that this happens on the server because we can essentially essentially do a complexity analysis on this. But if we get rid of this, then, and if this is labeled here, then we essentially lose now context of, is this coming later? Is this completely missing from the payload? So the client cannot identify if certain things are here. And that's where we essentially need metadata or aliased fragments, either something like this, where we essentially can say this fragment, for instance, is now called foo, so we can identify that, or things like that. And why I think this is actually good is because with the metadata, we still have the problem that now the structure of the client-generated code is different from the GraphQL structure, right? And with this aliased approach, aliased fragment approach that Yakov, I think, did that, introduced, you would have an alignment of the client-generated structure to the GraphQL query, just to catch everybody up on that.
Yeah.
And I think the primary concern that people have with basically what we're doing is we're splitting out the subtree, the like aliased subtree, into its own independent subtree, right? And there is cost, like the fact that we have 3,000 responses doesn't actually change the fact that you're going to have all of those responses as separate subtrees in some sense. So like there is an argument, even with fragment aliases, you want to be able in the response, what goes over the wire for our default JSON response format should be collapsed and merged. But that's adding complexity on top of complexity.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous that the medicine is worse than the disease here.
That's why I personally also like more the aliasing of fragments. It's you get a cleaner structure without this.
Joseph Ono will be thrilled. He's been pitching that one for like forever. That's sort of what I was getting at. Like that's a particular implementation of that. But my suggestion here is if the default mode is one where you do not get this sort of tracking of what is deferred and not deferred, you just get the sort of global sense that overall in this query, there's something that got deferred and therefore another payload will come. Is that a reasonable default state, or is it not? Like if it's the case that every single person who's using Apollo client, every single person who's using Relay client is going to be frustrated by that default behavior, then we're in bad shape. But if the vast majority of them will be totally okay with it, with the exception of specific instances where they need to have more control over it. And if the answer there is, well, don't use defer on a anonymous fragment, or use fragment aliasing, or use like some other tool that we can provide that can produce this specific behavior that we want. That might be an interesting way to essentially put the control back in the client's hands to decide whether or not it needs this tracking information or not.
I think it's when you need to decide if you can render a component, especially if part of the data is there.
Yeah, it's especially problematic because it's a foot gun that you will run into when you start composing disparate components that work, like that have been independently verified to work well. And then all of a sudden, when you try to like combine them onto one screen, everything blows up.
Yeah, that's not great.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused. We're talking about defer, but the example that Michael showed, it was streaming.
It doesn't matter. You can produce it with both. I just made it because it was the quickest way to get to that error. There are other examples. Also, Benji posted a couple of them where you can produce similar things with defers, where you get into the thing that you essentially for the backend make it inefficient. And then if the backend optimizes this, you have the problem that the client doesn't know if something arrived actually, because you cannot infer that from the data that you get.
I think the key thing is when you're deciding whether to render a component that is based off of some fragment, the key thing you need to know is like at the point in the tree that we may or may not have deferred or be streaming, whatever, like that we might have incremental responses coming in. At that point, am I in one of three states? Am I in the we've made the request, we're waiting for deferred data. Do we have the deferred data already, or was there an error in getting the deferred data and we're never going to get it? And like, we need some way that you can differentiate between those three states when you're actually trying to render. And I think that that's completely independent of like which client you're in or what. I don't think, yeah.
I agree, and I actually agree with Benji's comment that it's better to explicitly say it's over for certain stream, instead of repeating in every response that we're still pending a whole bunch of stuff. So basically, by default, it's continuing. If there is no other meta information, there is arrival of certain fragment. By default, everything is continuing. And then eventually you get signal, this is done. And your component has the signal. Okay, I can render it if it needs the entire set, right?
That's essentially, that's essentially what the metadata does. It says it's done. But I'm not advocating just for the metadata. I think just that, I'm still thinking that.
And basically, you are talking about this server kind of efficiency, but I think I thought the assumption is up to the server to decide how it will deliver, because it gives the freedom to the server and to bunch them. If it's efficient, bunch them, send the whole batch, right?
But there is so send the whole batch, but you can still end up with, if you do incrementals. I have a couple of experiments. You can really get the server into trouble with that if you not let the server in some cases optimize, because these incremental batches can become huge. So you're building up huge responses in memory.
What
so
stops you from
really kill
cutting them? No, but what stops you, because you have a freedom not to wait for a big batch, you have a freedom to speed out smaller batches, right? What stops you from this?
That's the question. We're basically trying to figure out what mechanism we can use to collapse the 3,000 batches into like 16 or 30, right? And from the client perspective, know that each of those independent 3,000 or whatever items are all fulfilled.
There are a lot of it's a problem domain that we have to fix. The second thing of that is that at the moment we discourage people to essentially optimize in the server, and I think even we should have an idea and give them, because if you now go and do a naive implementation of the spec, you actually introduce a security risk into your GraphQL server. And that shouldn't be the case. That if I just go like this against your GraphQL server, you essentially get into this 1,000 of patches. And we have to describe a way to avoid that you get into these cases. Could be complexity analysis or some case, but at the moment, if you just implement what we have, it's not safe.
But then maybe I already kind of, I think, expressed this idea that the defer is actually permission. It's not forcing server, but the client explicitly says, there are things I need as soon as possible. And there are things I know, certain history, crap, that will take time. I give you permission to deliver it when it's available. Essentially, it doesn't force you to certain way of delivering. The server has the freedom to batch it in 10, 1,000, 10,000, probably reasonable server would do it, in a reasonable way. But this is kind of, so defer, and I think it should be kind of permission. It's extra information, which data I need as soon as possible, and the rest as it goes on the server, depending on how busy you are.
It is also about like even creating in the backend the deferred tasks. So you're branching the execution. So if you cause the execution to branch 3,000 times, that's
why,
not only
again,
about batching.
I don't understand. Why 3,000? Just
depends. I just threw a number in here. It's about the spec at the moment just describes how we branch it, but it's actually more efficient to, in some cases, just drop the stream or defer direct, and then just fold it in instead of again creating this context branching and then starting processing something. I mean, that's closely related to the spec text that we have at the moment, right?
Yeah, we say in the spec that you should do it, and then if you have an advanced use case not to, then you don't have to. That's what leads to this whole discussion of where the client doesn't know if it actually did the defer or not. I definitely think that language should be updated, and we should have more clear guidelines on when a server should or should not be doing it, just like general recommendations. Benji brought this up in the last meeting. I think we should have like a default that if everybody follows, it minimizes the likelihood of a client being able to DOS a server.
Yeah, I mean, in the like it shouldn't be possible. If you think there is a case that you can do it, we should fix that in the spec. And I also discussed with Benji a couple of these things, and we need to apply them more aggressively, like optimization.
Yeah, but that does mean that. Yeah, it does mean that doing this and having these recommendations makes it important that we solve this problem, because it means that it's very likely that clients can run into this type of situation where it's adding, yeah, where the server had potentially ignored some but not all of your defers or streams.
So let's just defer is permission, not forced instruction. Defer is a permission. Do whatever you want, but it can be later. That kind of
right.
thing.
But the question is, how does a client understand what the server did? Right.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to figure out with this issue.
Just explicit label that this stream is done.
Did we explore Ivan's option that I think was added after yours, Rob? I don't know if we've talked through that.
Can you show?
Yeah, let me
I know
pull that up.
I know we haven't talked through it, I should say, but I'm wondering if we should talk through it.
Yeah, it's kind. I think it's mostly a variation on what mine was. And Ivan, if you want to walk through it, or
yes. So idea, as Benji pointed out, we kind of have like two similar problems. One, if stuff gets inlined, and second problem is like stream is finished or not, because like if you have two streams in a query, you don't know if one is finished until like the whole query is finished. It's a separate problem, but this one kind of solves both and doesn't introduce no concept. So idea is, instead of pending payloads, which is, it's not Boolean, it's like list of things. We use hasNext on individual items inside the incremental. So if stuff gets inlined, you don't get any interest in incremental. Things stay as is. If stuff is not inline and cannot be sent in first payload, you get like a label, path, and hasNext true, meaning like stuff is there, but we will ship you later. You don't repeat it in next payloads. You just send data when you finally get them, and send hasNext false, meaning like I already shipped everything. It worked for defer, it worked for stream, and it also have like two benefits. First benefit is like it's all like issue with stream, which is totally different issue, but still worth solving. So we know like stuff is finished, and also it remove like denial of service thing or performance thing when we have like a huge pending payloads. We have like Rob needs to repeat stuff in pending payloads between like messages, because you need to like if you reject a thing, you need to signal that you don't want to ship it. It's dropped or rejected, or it's now bubbling, or something happened, or error. So instead of having this thing when you have a Boolean state by having something in array and when removing it from array, now it's like Boolean flag, and it's more explicit. So if something gets rejected, you just send has next false, meaning like you should not wait for it. So kind of it eliminates the whole problem of having huge list of pending payloads. You have only potentially you will get at most one additional entry per pending stuff if you cannot batch. If you batch, you can eliminate them. Yeah, and I have a screaming cat in background. So she say I need to pass a microphone to somebody.
You would still have the case that Benji put in the chat. Right, yeah.
That's an island.
Where
but it I mean it applies it tree-wise the has next, which solves already the issue that we don't. So essentially you're saying, okay, this subtree is complete, and that solves already a couple of problems.
I have, as a server, mostly server-side programmer, I have a kind of problem with this so what you say, when you send additional batch or whatever batch of data, you explicitly say at this moment has next or not. The problem with the server side, if the server actually feeds it from some other source, database or external API, at the moment when I get the payload to send, I don't know, will there be more or not?
That's
so
solved.
Essentially,
that's already solved. Huh? That's already solved. You just sent an empty payload with has next false. So that's a iterator problem. We solved that already. It's in the discussion.
Yes. Okay, so sorry.
Ivan, could you highlight when a deferred payload is inlined, where that by this syntax is indicated?
I don't think it would be. I think that's the point.
Yeah. It's like Benja's idea from our previous group when like if we signal, that's like initially when I open an issue, I proposed to just like put stuff inside the incremental, but Benja like point was it's create denial of service. If you have like list, if you apply stream modifier on item, you will have like huge amount of stuff inside the incremental. So the only way to eliminate this problem of like explosion is make inlining implicit and non-inlining explicit.
Okay.
So it's like we basically restricted design space. So any solution we have should have this property. Otherwise, it's like denial of service. Thing.
And there we really have to be careful because we tried now. So I created a couple of tests where it's easy to DOS server that implements defer. And that is Benji's query is actually good because it shows it how to do it just with two lists and defer.
Do we think that the solution for the denial of service problem is having better guidelines around how when the server should ignore or not ignore defer and stream? Do we think that we need like
one thing we should at least, so we shouldn't discourage people from dropping defer. That because at the moment we are discouraging them with the node. So for advanced use case, we say you should you can do it, but essentially you should honor it. And that will, most people will then try to honor it. And then they exactly run into the issue that you can DOS them. And then we need to figure good ways out. I think we have to have guidelines and like how to estimate when you should drop differs. But Benji, how would you approach your issue now? Would you just drop the defer in this case?
Well, one of the things, as I mentioned in the chat just a moment ago, that I quite like about this is it effectively applies it on a per item basis as well, right? So the path that you have there might be index 3 and then index 5 in the second list, and then your deferred fragment. So you could actually say, oh, you know, I've got half of this data, I've already got all of it, so I can just inline that, and the other half I don't. So rather than, whereas with a defer with a label, you might say, oh, this entire label is deferred or it isn't. This allows you to actually be more granular, which I quite like. I think you could also, like, as you add these individual items to the, I mean, this is effectively like a list of promises, right? This is saying, I'm putting these promises in instead of giving you the data. And once your list of promises gets above a certain threshold, let's say, you know, 200, something like that, then maybe you just inline everything from there onwards. And that's fine. You can do that with this system, and you can do it on a discoverable basis as you walk through resolving all of the data, which is interesting. I've literally only just been made aware of this now, so I'd have to think about it more, but it definitely seems interesting for solving this problem.
And you said in the last meeting, like, a good default is probably also ignoring any defer stream that's inside of another defer stream. So it could kind of be like both, maybe it's configurable, like both the depth of deferred streams that you're allowing and the maximum number.
Yeah, one of the main issues where we have to analyze is if you have something in a list deferred, that's already an exclamation mark somehow. Especially when you have, like, one list could be okay, but like in this we have 2 list structures, then you could already have this multiplication.
Yeah, this example, it's 2 list structures, but it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2 or 100. It depends on the size, the total size of all the items.
Exactly.
Okay, we're coming up to the hour. This is a tough one, Rob. I feel like there's some agreement that this is there's a real problem that has to get solved here. I think there's confirm. I'd be very curious to know if there's like is there a missing primitive that we have? Like I'm resonating with Michael's earliest thought here, which was if we had fragment aliases, would this just straight up not be a problem at all? And I'm a little bit hesitant to put, that's obviously a just separate huge proposal, but and I don't want to block upstream and defer necessarily on doing that. But I am curious if knowing if like the ideal solution here is something that speaks to a missing piece as opposed to working around what we have. That's worth investigating. So I don't know. Hopefully this has been helpful. It feels like we haven't really hit on as a resolution forward, but hopefully it's enough input for you to continue jamming on this.
Yeah. At the end of the last meeting, we kind of decided to have like a breakout group to discuss this, which didn't happen because of the holidays in the US. But I think that we should try for that again and continue to dive in on this.
Rob, maybe we should also like maybe have a list of the problems that really are around that, and then we can organize a meeting around that, because then everybody can also get his thoughts on at home, and we have a because like this discussion already yielded a couple of problems and also solutions. Yeah, it's maybe we should all come together first, produce a little small document. I can write down what we have tested with this, and maybe Benji puts his thought to it also, and then we create an agenda of that and do the session.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to keep it, I think it makes sense to keep it separated between the two issues of telling the server good heuristics of when to ignore and not defer, and not ignore and not ignore, and how the client should, what information the server needs to give the client so it has the necessary information to handle those responses. They're separate but related issues that we need to figure out both. Yeah, so I won't take up any more of your time. But yeah, we'll do that.
Cool. Thank you for bringing attention to this one. This is a doozy. Okay, folks, thank you all for joining and all the healthy discussion across all of our agenda items. We'll see you all in the next one.
Thanks, everyone. This is really interesting.
Yeah.